Okay, this is the answer key video for 9.4, 10.3, and 9.3 review worksheet. All right, we're going to start the first one here. It says solve each equation by factoring. So now in this case, it's already factored. So we're going to go ahead and just set each one equal to 0. So I'm going to have m plus 5 equal to 0 and m plus 2 equal to 0. So your solutions here should be -5 and -2 when you solve each equation. Okay, going to example or number 2 here. Okay, now in this one, I do see a GCF of an n, so I'm going to go ahead and pull an n out and get n minus 5 equals 0. So now I set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So n equals 0 and n minus 5 equals 0. Now n equals 0 is already done. This, I'm going to go ahead and add the 5 over and get n equals 5. Okay, on number 3, first thing we're going to have to do is get this set equal to 0. So I'm going to move that 9x into the middle here. So I get 2x squared minus 9x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, all right, so now I'm going to make my list of factors, 1 times 2 and 1 times 5. Now in this case, it won't work like this, so I'm going to go ahead and flip one of them. And now when I take 2 times 5, I get 10. 1 times 1 is 1, and I want to make the 10 negative to get a -9. So my front numbers here will be 2x and 1x. My back signs will be numbers will be 1 and 5. Now I want my 10 to be negative, so I'm going to put my negative here, and I want my 1 to be positive, so I'm going to put my positive there. Okay, now we're going to set each one equal to 0 and solve. So I'm going to have 2x plus 1 equals 0. Subtract the 1 off and get 2x equals -1, and then divide and get -1/2. On the second guy here, I'm going to have x minus 5 equal to 0. I'm going to add the 5 over and get x equals 5. So I get -1/2 and positive 5. Okay, number 4. Again, we need to go ahead and set equal to 0 first. So I'm going to move that 5 over and get x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. So now I'm looking for factors of 5, -5. That get me -4. So if I think -5 and 1, when I multiply, I get -5, right? And then when I add them, I'm going to get that -4. So my answer here will be x minus 5 and x plus 1, and those are equal to 0. So now I'm going to take x minus 5 and set it equal to 0 and get 5. I'm going to take x plus 1 and set it equal to 0 and end up with -1. And those are my two solutions. Okay, number 5, let's go back the other way here. Okay, so on this one, this is a difference of squares. So I'm going to go ahead and square root both parts here. So I'm going to get 5x minus 9 and 5x plus 9 equal to 0. And so 5x minus 9 equals 0. 5x plus 9 equals 0. I'm going to add the 9 over and then divide by 5 and get 9/5. Same thing here. I'm going to subtract the 9 over and then divide and get -9/5. And those are my two solutions there. Okay. Okay, number 6. So this guy's looking like a perfect square. So I square root and square root. I get, not a 4. What I was doing there. 7x and 4. And then when I multiply it by 2, I need to check to make sure that that gets me 56, which it does. So I have 7x minus 4 and 7x minus 4 equals 0. So now I'm going to set each one equal to 0 and solve. But in reality, since I have the same thing twice here, I'm just going to solve one of them. Quadratic means we get 2 answers, okay? But in this case, it just happens that the answers end up being the same. So I still have 2 answers. It's just the same thing. All right, so then I'm going to add the 4 over and then divide and get 4/7. Okay? And like I said, if you really want to go ahead and set this one equal to 0 and solve it, you can. You're going to, like I said, get 2 answers, but they're going to be the same. All right, so find the dimensions of a rectangle that has a width of W and a length of W plus 6. Okay, so if I'm thinking about area, right, area equals length times width. So I've got an area of 91. And then I've got W and W plus 6 or my length times width that I'm going to multiply together. Okay, so now go ahead and distribute. So 91 equals W squared plus 6W. Okay, now subtract the 91 over. So I get W squared plus 6W minus 91. Okay, let's see, 91. Okay, 7 and 13 work. And then I'm going to make the 7 negative, so I get a positive 6 out of that. So I'm going to get W minus 7 and W plus 13. So now when I set each one equal to 0 and solve, I'm going to end up with a positive 7 and a negative 13. Now this is no good, so I'm going to go ahead and throw him out. So I know my width is 7. Let's see, what does it say? Let's find the dimensions. Okay, so if I know my width is 7, I know that 7 plus 6 is 13. So I have 7 foot by 13 foot rectangle. Okay, next one here. Let's see, we've got the height h of t in feet of an object shot from a cannon with initial velocity of 20 feet per second can be modeled by the equation. I don't know why that did that. That should be a parenthesis. I'll have to go back and relook at that, but that should be a parenthesis there. So it should be h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 20t plus 6. Find when the cannon hits the ground, okay? So my finishing height, or this guy right here, is going to be 0 because it's saying when does it hit the ground. Okay, so I'm going to have 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 20t plus 6. Now I am going to pull out a GCF here because I always want that front number to be positive. So I'm going to pull out a negative 2 and get 8t squared minus 10t minus 3. All right, so now I'm making a list here. So 1 times 8, 2 times 4, 1 times 3. And the problem on this one is going to be a lot of you guys are going to want to jump straight to this 6 and 4. The problem with that, though, is I need to subtract to get a 10, not add to get a negative 10. So this is actually not going to work. So I'm going to take this off. So then you need to go ahead and flip one of your sets. So I'm going to go ahead and flip the back side here. So now when I do that, 2 times 1 is 2. 4 times 3 is 12. And if I make that guy negative, it gets me negative 10 here in the middle. Okay, and then a positive times a negative is a negative, so that's going to work out. So just be careful. Make sure what you're picking out is actually right. So my combination here will be 2, 4, and 3, 1. So I have 0 equals, keep the negative 2 out front. I've got 2t and 4t. I've got 3 and 1. We want this inside 12 right here to be negative. So I'm going to put the negative here and the positive here. So now I'm going to set each part equal to 0 and solve. So 0 equals negative 2 is out. 0 equals 2t minus 3. So I add the 3 over and divide. So t equals 3/2 or 1.5 if you're thinking decimal form. Okay, on this one, I got 4t plus 1 equals 0. So I go ahead and subtract the 1 off, and then t equals negative 1/4. That is not going to work. We can't have negative time. So in this case, my answer will be 1.5 seconds. Okay? All right, number 9. All right, so we're going to break down 243. I know a 3 will go in there, and I get 81. And then 81 will break to 9 and 9. Now, if you see this right away and pair it up and move it out, that's awesome. So you got a 9 on the outside and a 3 on the inside. However, if you're a person who didn't see that and you went ahead and broke this down to 3 and 3, 3 and 3, that's okay. 3 times 3 is still going to be 9 on the outside. So it doesn't matter which way you do that. Okay, number 10 here. I'm going to go ahead and break this down to 2 and 10. 2 and 5. The 2's pair up and move out. So I've got a 2 on the outside and 5 on the inside. Okay, next page. Okay, so on this one, we're going to go ahead and break this down. So I got 16 and 10. Now the 16 is going to break to 4 and 4. So I'm going to go ahead and pair those up and move them out. And then 2 and 5, they don't pair up and move out, but the 4s will. So on the outside, I have a 4, And on the inside, I still have 2 times 5, or the 10. Okay, number 12 here. I'm going to break this down to 2 and 144. Now, I know 144 goes to 12 and 12. So I'm going to go ahead and pair up and move out those 12s. Okay, again, if you didn't notice that, no big deal. So let's say you did like 2 and 6, 2 and 3. Same thing here, 2 and 6, 2 and 3. You have a pair of 2s. And then you would have a pair of 3s. 2 times 2 is 4, times 3 is 12. So you end up with a 12 on the outside no matter which way you do it. And then this poor little 2 right here, he doesn't have a buddy. So we've got root 2 left over on the inside. All right, solve each equation by taking the square root, give exact and approximate solutions when appropriate, and round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so on this, do exactly what it says. It says take the square root of both sides, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to square root and square root. So b will equal, remember, plus or minus 10. Remember, you got to have 2 answers, okay? So this guy right here tells you there's 2, you need 2. Okay, on this guy, I square root both sides. Unfortunately, you cannot square a negative. That is a big no-no. So in this case, it's a no solution. Cannot square root a negative number. Okay, on this one, I'm going to have to isolate my b squared first by subtracting the 10 over and getting 24. Now I'm going to square root both sides, which means I am going to break this down. So I get 2 and 12, 2 and 6, 2 and 3. So the 2's pair up and move out. Okay, so I have b equals, don't forget your plus or minus. Remember, you have to have 2 answers. 2 on the outside, and then 2 times 3 is 6 on the inside. Now, you can go ahead and put the square root of 24 in your calculator. For some of you, it will break it down for you. And then remember, we're hitting that double arrow. Okay, so anytime you have a square root left, right? Anytime you have a square root, you have a decimal answer. You need 2 answers. So when I do this, I end up with plus or minus 4.9 when it's rounded off correctly. Okay, so again, this is my exact, and this is my approximate. Okay, all right. So this guy, I'm going to go ahead and got to divide by 81 on both sides. So I get n squared equals 36 divided by 81. Now in this case, when I square root both sides, I do know the square root of 36 and I know the square root of 81. So I'm going to end up with plus or minus 6/9. Now you do need to go ahead and reduce that fraction to plus or minus 2/3. So please don't forget to reduce fractions if you need to. Okay. All right, going to the next guy here. Okay, again, we're going to isolate first. So I'm going to go ahead and add that 7 over and get 2m squared equals 50. I'm going to divide both sides by 2 and get m squared equals 25. I'm now going to go ahead and square root both sides. And I'm going to end up with m equals plus or minus 5. Okay. Okay, so on this next one here, I'm going to subtract the 12 over and get 2n squared equals 112. I'm going to go ahead and divide that by 2 and get n squared equals 56. And now I'm going to square root both sides. Okay, I can break down 56, so it will go to 2 and 28, 2 and 14, 2 and 7. So the 2's pair up and move out. So I've got n equals plus or minus 2 on the outside, and then the 2 times 7 or 14 on the inside. Now you do have a square root left in the game, so you need to go ahead and come up with the decimal form of that. And so when I round it off, I get plus or minus 7.5. Again, round to the nearest tenth, which is 1 decimal place. Okay, find the length of a side that has a square with an area of 300 square meters. Okay, so again, here's my, if I'm thinking about a square, I don't know what this is. We know that the square would have the same length and width. So I've got x times x equals 300, or x squared equals 300. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead. Let's see, what did it tell us to do? Did it tell us to give exact or approximate? Give exact only. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and square root both sides. And I'm going to go ahead and break this down to 3 and 100. And I know 100 is going to go to 10 and 10. So I'm going to take the 10s and move them out. So I end up with x equals plus or minus oh, nope, I got that backwards, don't I? How about 10 root 3? Now, again, keep in mind, don't need plus or minus on this because you can't have a negative length. So in this case, my side length is going to be 10 root 3, and that's in meters. Again, it just asks for exact, so that's my exact solution. Okay, so on B here, there's a typo on this worksheet. Hopefully yours is right. It should be 360 instead of 300 there. So now when it's asking for area of a triangle, we've got 1/2 base times height, and that's going to equal your area. So I've got 360 equals 1/2 6x times 6x. So I end up with 360 equals 1/2 times 36x squared. Now I'm going to divide the 36 by half and get 18x squared. All right, so now when I divide them, I'm going to move that up over here. I get x squared equals 20. So now I'm going to square root both sides. Okay, and then when I do that, this is going to break down to 4 and 5, and then the 4 will break down to 2 and 2. 2's pair up and move out. So x equals plus or minus 2 root 5. And then again, because this is a shape, we don't worry about the negative. So I have 2 root 5 inches. Okay, and it did ask for exact only, so yep, so this is my answer. Okay, so 2 root 5 inches. Okay, on the last one here, we've got a circle. So we know a circle area equals pi r squared. So my area is 89. For pi, we're told to use 3.14, and we're going to find r squared. So now I'm going to take 89 and divide by 3.14. Okay, so I get r squared equals, and let's see, so it's like 28.3439-ish. So now I'm going to go ahead and square root both sides here. So I'm going to square root and end up with plus or minus 5.3 when it's rounded off, because it did say that we need the approximate solution only. So nearest tenth, again, I don't have a negative, so it's just going to be 5.3 here. And my label should be miles in this case. So miles. And that is your answer. Okay? And that concludes this answer key.